Hey everyone, today I'm going to be showing you how to directly remove CO2 from the air. Now why would we want to do this? Well, prior to the Industrial Revolution, there was about 280 parts per million of CO2 in the air on average. And it had been that way for around 6,000 years. But now let's check how much CO2 there is in the air. In order to test the CO2 in the air, I have this cool little cube here that I can measure a bunch of stuff with. Okay, let's do CO2 here. Okay, and we are right around 400, on average like 405 parts per million of CO2. Okay, let's make sure it's working. Yep. So when I breathe on it, you can see it goes up to around 800 parts per million. And then it comes back down to this baseline here. So you can see we're bouncing right around 410 parts per million. The global average right now is 417 parts per million of CO2. So you can see that since the Industrial Revolution, we've increased the parts per million of the CO2 in our atmosphere by around 200. Why is this? Well, there's a ton of carbon that's been buried in the earth as natural gas and coal and oil. We call these fossil fuels. So the carbon that was normally buried in the earth for the last millions of years suddenly got released into the atmosphere in a relatively short amount of time. Now the thing with CO2 is there's already this huge cycle of CO2 that's mostly balanced by plants using it and then decaying, and also the oceans absorbing it and then releasing it. But this unbalanced portion from fossil fuels releasing quickly is causing the concentration to increase. So what can we do about all this extra carbon in the atmosphere? Well, we can reduce fossil fuel usage so we can stop putting so much in the atmosphere, but what about the carbon that's already in the atmosphere? Well, what if we just put it back in the earth where it came from? This is actually possible. Let me show you. So let's say I want to capture some CO2 from this room here. There are a lot of ways I can do it. For example, if I just get some liquid nitrogen and pour it out, you'll notice that some white chunks start forming on the surface of the liquid here. This is actually solid CO2 or dry ice, and it came from the air. This is called cryogenic carbon capture. The CO2 will actually just condense on whatever's colder than the solid CO2. Now I've collected this solid CO2, but the question is, what do we do with it now? So let's just go bury this dry ice back in the dirt. Now obviously this isn't going to work because the CO2 will just escape. But is there a way to bury it so that the CO2 doesn't escape? Well, actually, yes. There's a company called Climbworks who actually sponsored this video, and they figured out a really cool way to capture and store this CO2. They directly capture CO2 from the air with a filter. Then the filter's heated and the CO2 comes off and is turned into liquid CO2. Then this is the really cool part. They pump the liquid CO2 deep underground where their plant is located in Iceland. And there happens to be a ton of basalt deep underground in Iceland. Now, basalt acts like a sponge for the liquid CO2. So the CO2 eventually mineralizes in around 1 to 2 years and becomes a solid that's now locked in place. Now, even though there are many places in the world that have the right type of rock for this to work, I was actually amazed to learn while researching Climbworks that there's actually enough basalt rock just in Iceland alone to store the entire planet's excess CO2. Climbworks is really cool because the world isn't just going to stop using fossil fuel anytime soon. So CO2 capture like this from Climbworks will become essential in limiting climate change. And here comes the best part about Climbworks. You can subscribe to a monthly or yearly plan and they will remove CO2 in your name. So that means that climate action starts at just $1 and onwards, so really everyone can participate. We need to change our perspective to be able to change the climate. So a small shift in our perspectives can make a big difference in starting to scale solutions today. So if you want to start removing CO2 today, head to atnow.climbworks.com/theactionlab. And thanks again for watching another episode of The Action Lab. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet, and check out theactionlab.com for Action Lab science gear. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.